in the most powerful sermon from one of the most influential Christian leaders of our time. John Piper's sermon, boasting only in the cross of Christ, sent waves through a rising generation of Christians, and we still feel its impact around the globe today. The sermon turned moneymakers into missionaries, American dreamers into cross-bearers, and lovers of the world into lovers of Jesus.
I grew up in a Christian home, and this was hanging over the sink in the kitchen from the time I was a tiny little child. And every morning I would get up and run into the kitchen, and there it would be. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Which communicated to me over the years as a child, you can waste your life. You can really waste it. It was built into my heart as a little child. Don't waste it. My dad told the story, one of the most moving I can remember as a little kid, sitting, hearing my father preach as an evangelist, and my father's eyes could really blaze in preaching. He always began the sermon with a joke, but it wasn't very long before his eyes were blazing, and he was telling stories that would make you cringe. And one of them was a revival meeting in which, at the end of the meeting, an old man that everybody had been praying for decades evidently walked to the front, I think aged something like 78, and just wept and wept and wept as my father sat beside him on the pew. And all he could say was, I've wasted it, I've wasted it, I've wasted it. And when I heard my dad tell that story, and I heard it numerous times, and I remembered that plaque, I felt with every fiber of my being, I will not waste it. You get one crack, and there's no replay. And you can throw it away. And my zeal not to waste my life is as alive today as it's ever been, perhaps more so because it feels so short before I stand before the judge, King Jesus, and give an account of my life. What a tragedy in America. This is one of the biggest tragedies in our culture, that billions of dollars are invested every year to get people my age to waste the rest of our lives. Billions of dollars invested to persuade us and lure us at any cost, it seems, to waste the rest of our lives. It's called retirement. 20 years, perhaps, of play, leisure, ease, while the world, uncared for medically, uneducated, poverty-stricken, unevangelized, sinks under the weight of healthy 65-year-old people playing bridge and shuffleboard and collecting shells and fishing and golfing their way into the presence of King Jesus. And you know what? You're going to join them unless, at this stage in your life, you make some very radical decisions, very radical commitments, very radical choices about where your treasure is. Do not assume you won't be sucked in. There are powerful forces angling to get you to waste your lives. For many of you are totally enslaved. And I pray on the way to being set free.
We sail for Troy in 3 days. This war will never be forgotten. nor will the heroes who fight in it.
Do you know what's there? Waiting, beyond that beach. Immortality! Take it! It's yours!
The man wants to die.
It's impossible to objectively measure the influence of Piper's sermon, but many have argued it may be one of the most important sermons in our generation. Countless Christian leaders point to Piper's sermon at Passion One Day 2000 as the turning point in their lives. Some were there that day, some watched the video later. Some encountered the message in Don't Waste Your Life, the book that was based on the sermon. They can choose comfort and success and prosperity and waste their lives, or they can choose Christ and experience the glory of making their life count for Jesus. But either way, they have to make a choice.
I'm old enough to be the father of almost everybody on the grass. And I speak to you as the father perhaps that you never had. And I speak to you perhaps as the father that you did have who never had a vision for you. Or maybe the father that you had who has a vision for you, and it's all about money and it's all about status. Anybody in this crowd can make a worldwide difference, because it isn't you, it's what you're gripped with. But one of the really sad things about this moment right now is that there are hundreds of you in this crowd who do not want your life to make a difference. All you want is to be liked. Maybe finish school, get a good job, find a husband or a wife, a nice house, a nice car, good vacations, grow old healthy, have a fun retirement, die easy, no hell. And that's all you want. You don't give a rip whether your life counts on this earth for eternity. And that's a tragedy in the making. That is a tragedy in the making. About 3 weeks ago, we got news at our church that Ruby Eliason and Laura Edwards were killed in Cameroon. Ruby Eliason, over 80, single all her life, a nurse, poured her life out for one thing: to make Jesus Christ known among the sick and the poor in the hardest and most unreached places. Laura Edwards, a medical doctor in the Twin Cities, and then in retirement, partnering up with Ruby, also pushing 80, and going from village to village in Cameroon. And the brakes give way. Over a cliff they go, and they're dead instantly. And I asked my people, is this a tragedy? Two women in their 80s, almost, a whole life devoted to one idea: Jesus Christ magnified among the poor and the sick in the hardest places. And 20 years after most of their American counterparts had begun to throw their lives away on trivialities in Florida and New Mexico, fly into eternity with a death in a moment. Is this a tragedy, I asked? It is not a tragedy. I'll read you what a tragedy is. I've got a little article here from Reader's Digest. This is a tragedy. Title of the article, Start Now, Retire Early. Bob and Penny took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago when he was 59 and she was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect shells. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And there are people in this country that are spending billions of dollars to get you to buy it. And I get 40 minutes to plead with you, don't buy it. With all my heart, I plead with you, don't buy that dream. The American dream. A nice house, a nice car, a nice job, a nice family, a nice retirement. As the last chapter, before you stand before the Creator of the universe to give an account with what you did. Here it is, Lord, my shell collection. Look, Lord, my shell collection. And look at my boat. Well, not for Ruby and not for Laura. Don't waste your life. Don't waste it.
Piper holds up the American dream and he tests it against the light of eternity and the judgment of Christ, and it fails miserably. But one way or another, they saw the fork in the road that Piper presented. Standing there, they looked down one road and saw the folly of the American dream. They looked down the other road and they saw the beauty of Jesus. They chose in that moment to make their lives count. The message of the shells lives on.
Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. 48 years, I've seen that almost every day of my life. And I am here to plead with you to make your life count.